Hi, my name is Altaf Vaya. I'm a pharmacist and a pharmacy contractor who's had many years of experience in pharmacy, especially community pharmacy in England. And I wanted to share a presentation on a topic that's close to me. It's surviving and thriving as a locum pharmacist, positioning yourself as a locum that everyone wants, not one that can just be tolerated. I'm going to look at the current market, upskilling, value, and communication. Even if you don't want to hear me speak throughout the presentation, I hope the slides can help you understand today's market and the kind of points that I'm bringing up. All this information is information that I've put together, so it's according to how I see things, but it might not be what is actually happening on the ground. So that's my little bit of a disclaimer. So where are we currently? What do we know about the markets? So at the moment, we can see that supply has caught up. In many areas, there are more locums than shifts. Demand no longer outstrips supply the way it once did. I think during COVID and post-COVID, that doesn't mean that there isn't a demand. There is still demands in remote areas, but some of the inner city shifts, we see that there are quite a few locums in the inner cities where the demand has reduced and where we find that supply is on the increase. We can also see that rates have softened. That doesn't mean that locums should be underpaid or undervalued for what they do, but we can find that the current model is showing that hourly rates have come under some pressure. Premium fees that people used to pay because of the demand have kind of fizzled out a little. But again, this depends on the type of locum that you are and what you bring to the business. The sector is stretched. We know that as contractors, many are finding that there is a thin margin in funding. There's funding pressures. We've seen closures in the pharmacy sector, and we can see pharmacy is under continuous financial strain. This has an impact on community pharmacy, on contractors, but also on locums. So, how can you upskill yourself and be the best that you can be? The more you can do, the more shifts you're going to win, and the stronger your rate conversion. Breath makes you hard to replace. Now, what that means is that people who, or locums that are competent, that have the skills, they are going to be at the top end of the kind of person that community pharmacy wants to employ, that businesses want to employ. So clinical competence, for example, means that the locum understands pharmacy first, they're confident across all the clinical pathways, they can deliver the service. Secondly, we know that many pharmacies do vaccinations, which are now quite routine, so you need to be aware of being able to vaccinate. Many do travel clinics, having knowledge about this. Again, it depends on the insurances and the PGDs in place. But if you have skills and knowledge on this kind of vaccines and travel clinics, then you're able to deliver them if everything's in the right setting. Independent prescribing, we know that this is now becoming more and more needed, and there's a bigger demand for independent prescribing in community pharmacy. It's going to be it is part of our new funding model. And we also know that the newly qualified pharmacists coming out of university will have independent prescribing as part of their learning outcomes from university. We also need to think about the technical fluency. This means being able to look at the pharmacies that you go into and understanding the PMR systems, dispensing without having to have a dispenser showing you all the systems. So just being aware of the current ones, there are a few on the market, but just to give you an example, you've got the ProScript, you've got RxWeb, you've got Cegedim, You got Pharmacy X, you got Apotect, you got all of these current systems, as well as one of my favorites, which I use in my pharmacy, which is Titan. And when we put Titan in, just to give you my example, a lot of locums didn't know how to use Titan or what Titan kind of meant for um, their checking exercises, how they can work as locums using Titan. What is Titan, for example? So obviously, this is a game changer in PMR systems. And I'm not saying this on any other bias, but because I like the system Titan. But it's one of them that when I've been helping locums, it's one that has continuously been a question asked from me or to me by locums that you have Titan. What does it mean? And you see that many people, when they're now putting shifts on, if they have a PMR like Titan, they advise the locum that they're using Titan. So some pharmacists are aware of that. Also, you need to be able to adapt to local SOPs. Um, Many pharmacists go in, they don't always follow what's written on the SOPs, and we understand that you can't read through all 100 pharmacy SOPs, but you should clearly have some standards of how you're working, and you should be able to adapt to anything that needs to be done in that local area by looking at the SOPs, understanding them, using AI, and again, there's a disclaimer here, using AI appropriately to maybe analyze the SOP, make sure that you're competent in the key information in this. And with today's technology, we have the good fortune of being able to do that. So the mindset that matters the most, your rate is a claim about value. So we hear about people talking about how much they want to earn an hour, what is the local hourly rate, an average rate. And I think a premium rate is a promise, not a price tag. Asking for a certain fee per hour isn't just about the number. If you want the rate, you have to walk in and visibly deliver it every shift. Now, some locals might look at this and say, you can't put a rate on what we do because it's a part and parcel of our jobs. And I understand that. But at the same time, when you're working in any business, you want or you are going in as a locum, you're selling yourself. You are trying to show that people need you in their business, that you're competent to work there and you're going to perform so that business makes a profit from your day job. You know, we can't mix our words here. When you go in as a locum, people want you to do a job, not just to sit around, not just to sit there and answer basic questions, but they want you to do a job so that it produces an income for that business, which ideally should be there to kind of pay you at the same time for a rate that clearly works for both you and that community pharmacy contractor. So what earnings and what earning rate should look like? So number one, when we're going into some pharmacies, especially pharmacies that don't always use technology such as Titan, some PMR systems like ProScript, you can see that sometimes there's a clear backlog of scripts waiting for that locum pharmacist. And sometimes there's a lot of workload that needs to be done. And if the pharmacist or the locum on the day is able to clear that backlog, being able to manage that dispensary in that short period of time that you're there doesn't mean you can get everything done, doesn't mean that you compromise on safety, but just if you're able to keep on top of the workload, it helps support the pharmacy team. Secondly, the services, it's not just about delivering on prescriptions and making sure that that workload is done. There is an understanding nowadays that services is just as important. if pharmacy first comes in and you've got walk-ins and you've got dispensing to check, it is a lot of work. But what happens is if you can get your time right, if you can work with the team that surrounds you, if you can forge good relationships with these people, then you're able to perform more services. Solve what's in front of you, resolve the problems that you find rather than leaving them for the next person. I know sometimes when I speak to contractors, they have locums that do what they need to do for the day and that's it. They're not too worried about what happens with the next person, or sometimes they've gone in and there's a mess from the person before and they feel like that's not their job to correct that. I disagree. I think when you go in, whatever you can work on, wherever you can fix a problem, it's better for you. Because if you can leave the place better, and if you can make sure that, you've done a good job for the day, that kind of, relationship building exercise that you do in that business allows for that contractor owner to see that you are someone who cares about their business, who's there to support them, and who's going above and beyond to make sure that the pharmacy is operating as if they were in the business themselves. So before you say yes to a shift, I always tell people have the right conversations up front. I run a locum pharmacy WhatsApp group, and we try in our local area to be non-political in what we say, but making sure that locums are fairly treated and that contractors and locums in the local area are connected, as well as trying to get local information, local intel, local services, information, training, everything in that group to help locums and contractors. So the first thing I tell locums to do is the role, what's expected of you, which services they need delivered on that day, and the realistic workload for the day. And I know some locum groups have, tell people to use pharma data, check how many, prescriptions on average that pharmacy does, so that person's better prepared. But I can tell you sometimes a pharmacy that's doing lower items might not be as organized as some pharmacies that are doing really high amounts of work. So it doesn't always give the right idea, but it allows you to judge what the workload might be. Understand the site, understand the place that you're walking into, the team, know which systems they're using. Sometimes you want to kind of understand, maybe you can ask what pace the work's going to be. Are there any pharmacy first? Is there any services that you need to be aware of? Who are the key staff at that place? Are they trained? Are they technicians? Are they all apprenticeships, for example? Have the staff been working there for many years or are they newly trained? So that's one of the things that comes up a lot. And the third thing that I think is really important nowadays, and we hear lots of issues with, is payment terms. Many locums get paid, or many businesses, I would say, pay locums in a set cycle. We've recently found in the pharmacy contract, people can get advance payment on a certain date a month. Some pharmacies use that as a way to pay locums on that week. Throughout the month, they use that kind of timeline to pay people. So have that conversation so you're not left chasing. I find that sometimes locums don't understand this or they put an invoice in and the expectations are that they'll get paid relatively quickly. But sometimes if you're starting, I'll give you an example. If the advance payments come on the 11th or 12th of the month and you've worked on the 25th or 26th of the month, that pharmacy might not pay you till the next 11th or 12th of the month. I'm not saying that happens with everyone, and I'm not saying that that's the way it should work, but for some pharmacies, this might be a system that you need to be aware of. So have that conversation before you start having to chase up money or feel like you've not been paid at the right time. Again, this depends on each business, and you as a locum have to decide on whether you want to be paid in that way or how or I would say what your expectations are in terms of your payments. Protect your flexibility, control over your own schedule is one of the real rewards of locuming. You know, you can book when you want to locum, how you want to locum, and what hours you want to locum. So plan your availability around the life that you want, not whatever lands in the first inbox. And when I say that, sometimes people book, locums that come in, but come nearer to the time, they then decide that, they've got other things on, they're getting better rates. So why should they work in the job that they've already committed to? And I would say once you've made a commitment and you have that intent to work at some place, don't let that person down. And I'm saying this to contractors as well. If you book someone, you have taken on a commitment. And I think that relationship is really important. There are locums that sometimes get booked and unbooked. Um, that's a contractor's fault. But many times I've heard that locums have sometimes let down community pharmacies and that contractors suddenly trying to look for another locum, but because it's last minute, the rates that they have to pay are a lot higher, and it just causes unnecessary issues for both parties. Build regular sites. I tell locums as well that if you like a place, if you work well in that place and if they're looking for regular locums, taking into account, all the tax regulations. I'm not an expert to speak on that, but just to put a disclaimer in there. But repeat bookings, sometimes you feel comfortable at site, you can work with the teams, you build a rapport, and it's nice to be in the same environment, and working becomes safer, more practical when you understand the place. Hold your boundaries, be reliable and professional, but don't let flexibility quietly erode into always saying yes. Make sure that you have agreements in place. If you want a certain rate and if you feel like, the rate's going up and down, or if you feel like, the workload's increased, you don't want to just kind of say yes to everything that comes along and then you feel hard done by because that then it makes it difficult to go and have those relationships fixed by asking for more or by having conversations that can be difficult. But at the same time, I would say to people that it's good to hold them conversations if you're having regular shifts, analyze what you've done for them, talk about it, show the improvements you might have made in that business, and that way the contractor might see um, the side that you're talking from, and they might be able to relook at your shift times or the payments that they give. Something I really find that is important, and I say this in everything that I do in my life, is being the problem solver. People pay people to be the problem solver, not to be the problem spotter. And that's the difference. It's easy to spot problems and to kind of to push them aside. It's much harder to be the problem solver. But I can tell you, if you're a problem solver, if you're the person that can fix things, even if you have to go above and beyond, and I'm not saying that that means that you get paid less or that you feel obligated. But what I am saying is the people who can problem solve when you walk into a pharmacy, if there are issues, if you can work around them and solve some of the issues, people will remember you, people will appreciate you, and hopefully people will ruminate. I've said that correctly to pay you correctly for your time. And that's something that's really important when you're building relationships. So there's two types of people. One type of locum is they list everything that's wrong on arrival. They see problems in the CD cabinet, for example. They might see a wrong item in a basket. Um, there's a number of problems that we can go into, but you see some issues when you come in. Um, you flag the problems, but you don't always put a solution to them. You sometimes write notes for someone else to deal with it. Sometimes you're scared to deal with it because you don't know what the backlash to yourself will be or to your professional indemnity or your professional standards. So I understand that it's not always easy to fix everything, but sometimes if you've got your um, hat on, understanding the issue, you might be able to find a solution. And that could be looking at something that I've seen in the past where the methadone count, and this is going back many years when I helped quite a few locums and done some locum shifts. The methadone count wasn't right. I got it measured again and again and made sure that the methadone that I started with and finished with was correct. That the methadone that hadn't been accounted for in terms of where there might have been an input error, I tried to resolve it by trying to understand what might have gone wrong. Now, it's many years ago since this happened on a locum shift, nearly 20 years ago. But I hear about it even today that these things happen. And sometimes it's a clear fix where you can see an entry is not being put in, or one of the entries on the paper register or on the registries has been incorrect for a patient collecting. So simple fixes. Um, some people go into work and they know there's going to be issues. They're trying to put a patch on it. They're trying to put a plaster on the problem, temporarily try to, sort something out, but it's going to come back the next day or in a couple of days. But then you feel like you're not going to be there, so it's not your problem. Um, and then some people just walk in and they ignore the problems. They see what's happened and they're just like, it's not my issue. It's someone else's issue. And that happens again and again, and the same issues just become inherent in that site. Then you have locums and pharmacists that are solvers. They triage what actually matters first. They go in, they continue doing the job, but they might see that there is a CD error, and when they get time, they want to fix it. Even if they can't fix it on the day, they acknowledge it, they do whatever they can to make sure that the right steps can be taken to get that matter fixed, whether letting the manager know, the staff know, or just to kind of investigate the problem in a way that you're adding to the solution. Um, Resolving issues. We all know that in pharmacy sometimes you can't get stock, you can't finish a prescription, but if you're a locum, you might know an alternative. Pick up the phone to the surgery, you might need to write a letter. It's going to take a few more minutes. The patient might need some of that medication today, so at least you can deliver some of it, and then understand that the other item that you can't get in or that formulation is not available to try to fix it and make that patient understand instead of leaving it there knowing that that patient who rang in the morning at 9 o'clock, who's expecting that medicine at 5 o'clock, isn't going to get it on that day and they're going to have an issue the next day. So there's, there's ways of fixing that. There's ways of communicating with the patient, but in reality, you're becoming the solver of the problem. Building fixes that hold, after you've left. Sometimes when you're working as a locum and you worked at many sites, you can easily see things that work really well and you can implement them. Now, that doesn't mean that that pharmacy team will agree, but if you can see a fix that might help the staff, at least acknowledge it, let them know about it, let them take that control. And if it helps them, they might want to improve themselves and it might take your advice and your fix to the rest of the team and incorporate into their daily SOPs. If you can hand the site back better than it is, and I can tell you the person that works for me on a regular basis, whenever she comes to my pharmacy once a week, I always find that that person leaves my pharmacy in a better place than it was because she comes in, and I'm saying she because the lady that works for me um, always does a better job than me sometimes on the Fridays, especially and Saturdays, because they can sometimes see things that I don't see as a contractor or the pharmacist on an everyday basis. They come in, they can see sometimes the issues and they're able to resolve some of the issues, or they're able to give me ideas on how we can fix things or what needs to be done when I haven't had time to look at it. So in the end, my business is actually in a better position when I'm hiring these locums to support me. So the thread through all of it is communication. Communication is what gets you wanted, and it's from agreeing your rate to clarifying your role, so there's no surprises on the date. Navigate payments, understand the tight cash flow sometimes. So, just talk about what that looks like in terms of when you'll get paid. Sometimes when people haven't got paid after a few days after sending the invoice, they're ringing the contractor or they're emailing. Sometimes they get ignored, which is not the right way of doing it for the contractor to the locum. But what happens is that that contractor doesn't know what to say. They might not have the cash flow to pay that day. And because that communication has not been done, you start getting miscommunication. I think community pharmacy is such an important place where communication um, is needed. And we are seeing some locums, sadly, who haven't been paid for their times. Some large corporations haven't paid locum pharmacists um, for a number of months. Some pharmacists are having to go to court, some locums, to retrieve their money. That's not on contractors. If people are taking on locums or regular pharmacists, they need to make sure that people are paid at the right time in the right way. Because when you give up your time and your knowledge and your experience and you agree a rate, there needs to be payment at the end of it, and no one should be hard done by. And this is why I say communication is what separates a locum who's tolerated from one who's genuinely wanted. And I think the whole point of this presentation is that you want to be that locum that people want back. So you need to understand the market, look at the rates. You know, you want to get the best rate. We all know that people want to get paid the best amount of money that they can because at the end of the day, you deserve it. That's the money that you want to charge for yourself. So if you have a rate that you have in mind for yourself and call it rate X, and you don't feel like you want to negotiate on that rate, that's your kind of basic rate that you charge for the hour, then stick to that rate. There's nothing wrong with it, but make sure you're clear to the person that you're going to locum for, so they understand that that's your rate. At the same time, and your rate. Upskill widely, make sure you're able to deliver. Your fee is a promise you keep every shift. And I know some locums might say, well, hold on, when I'm being employed for a locum shift, you know, it's not just about me having to earn because I charge a certain rate. I'm not saying that. What I'm trying to say is when you take on a job, you're getting paid to do a job. That's why you're getting paid a locum fee, and take the right fee that you feel is correct for yourself, but make sure you work for that rate. Don't just stay at a rate or a lower rate and then feel like you're underpaid and you're not being able to deliver. And agree it up front about what you need to do on that role, the site, when you're going to get paid. Again, this is an issue for today where we're finding a lot of disagreements in terms of payment time schedules, locums getting upset that they don't get paid. So it's something that is important in today's time and age. So we need to understand that currently this is an issue, And the reason why I put this presentation together is so some of this can be ironed out in terms of what locums can do, but also for the contractors that are listening to me. Solve it, don't spot it. If you're a locum, go in, and look at ways that you can support that pharmacy, make things better, be someone that's a doer. Don't just sit there expecting, that cup of tea to come to your hand and you've got to check a few baskets. And why can't other people in that team, like a checking supervisor or, ACT or having the technician there, why can't they do all the stuff? Why am I having to work? And the idea here is that if you take on a shift, you need to know what you're going in for. You need to delegate, but you also need to understand that you're getting paid to do a job. So make sure you leave the in the best position it can be after your shift. And sometimes I tell people, and I've been told this myself, is that when you're working, sometimes we all want to overstate ourselves. We want to show that we are the best. And sometimes you need to kind of under under commit yourself, but overachieve. Meaning, don't go there saying I'll do 101 things just to get a locum shift, and then not able to cope with the demand. Your ego gets in the way sometimes. So sometimes it's better to say, hold on, this is what I'm good at. I'm going to go in there and tell the person that's giving you the shift, I can go and try my hardest. This is what I can do. If there's a lot of prescriptions, I need to get that done. And then when you go to the site, if you can overachieve on what you said, then obviously people are going to respect you more. If you go in there saying, I can do everything, I'll get everything done, and then you get there and you struggle, that pharmacist, contractor, whoever they may be, a manager, whoever's giving you the shift, might then say, well, hold on, we paid the extra rate. We were willing to compromise on the rate. The person said that they can do X, Y, Z. They've come in and they've not been able to cope. So always um, push yourself to undercommit, but to over-deliver. And I hope that leaves a mark on what I think should be done as a locum. I hope this presentation has been useful, and just remember, communication is key. Don't panic. Sometimes things are going to go right, things are going to go wrong. Make sure that your insurances nowadays cover you to do certain types of work and services, injectables, weight management services. There's lots of clinics that pharmacies run, and sometimes as a locum, you might be pushed to do some of this and set your boundaries. If you can do it, great. If you can't do it, just make sure from the outskirt you're clear about the services that you're able to offer. I hope that helps, and thank you for listening.